Hey there guys, Alrex here, and today I'm going to be doing a Pokemon Leaf Green starter run. Now what is a starter run? Well, it's basically a just more challenging version of Pokemon Leaf Green, where I'm only allowed to use starter type Pokemon. Now I know what you're thinking, but there's 100 different starter type Pokemon, how are you going to pick? Well, for this one, I'm only going to be using the Bulbasaur line, Pikachu, and Eevee. That way it gives me more of a challenge, since I only have one fully evolved Pokemon. And honestly, it was really fun to do so, having to only be allowed to use 3 Pokemon, one of which I never used in Bulbasaur. And honestly, it was fun, I won't lie. Anyway, before we get started, could you please subscribe? As you can see, I barely have all that much. Anyway, as we see here, I get the Bulbasaur and name him Greg. And then my rival, Poop69, gets the Charmander and then decides to battle me. As I send out old Greg, we go through the whole, battle tutorial, something I thought was annoying. I set up a few growls so that I can lower the Charmander's attack. Of course, being faster, it seems that he was able to get some good hits in. But luckily, with a few tackles, I win. Nice. Next up, I learned the catching tutorial, something I'll only use once. And speaking of which, I find a Pikachu in the forest, which was a pain to catch, and as a result, I decided to name her Karen. Welcome to the team, Karen. Next up is Brock, and well, you can obviously tell how easy this one was. It's a Bulbasaur versus rock types. I really don't think it'd be that hard. As I start up a Leech Seed, Brock goes for a few defense curls. However, that really doesn't do much as I start using Vine Whips. As then Greg gets up to level 14, and I decide to stay in, using Vine Whips against Brock's other Pokemon. His Onix goes down, and I win, gaining the Boulder Badge. Yippee. Next up, I get Ivysaur, and then I go for the Helix fossil. Praise Lord Helix. Next, I get to teach Karen a few more basic moves, including Mega Punch. Yes, those are basic to me. Then at Celadon in the city, Poop decides to try and battle me. Of course, after a few Thundershocks, his Pidgeotto goes down. And, well, then I decide to bring out Greg up against his Rattata. A few Vine Whips later, and, well, I win. Next up is Charmeleon, which I send out Karen to make sure that I don't get Greg killed immediately, as I go for a Thundershock, paralyzing. He starts going for some powerful attacks like Ember, and unfortunately takes out old Karen. Luckily, I get a Vine Whip off of Greg, and, well, next up is Abra. Luckily, Zabra can barely do anything, so a few Vine Whips later, and we win. Take that, Poop69. Next up is Misty. And, well, you can kind of tell how easy this was. I have an electric and grass type. I go for the Thundershocks on her Staryu, getting rid of it pretty quickly with Karen. As Karen goes up to level 20, I decide to teach her Slam, getting rid of Double Team. Then Starmie comes out, and I decide to go in for Greg. As she goes for Swift, I go for a Vine Whip, and we kind of just do this for a bit. But she goes for a Super Potion, which was honestly kind of annoying. Then I decide to go for Leech Seed, as she keeps up with her Swifts. I try and poison her, but it really isn't working as well as I hoped, until I finally get it. God, that took forever. Anyway, then I decide to heal up Greg so that he won't die, and we win against Misty. It was actually harder than you'd think, funnily enough. and we got the Cascade badge. Next we go and help out Bill, and, well, after being thankful, he gives us his ticket. We then go to the SS Anne and battle against Poop one more time. As you can tell, this is a bit more interesting, as he sends out his Pidgeotto. I go for a Thunder Shock, and if I said interesting, nah, I meant this was easier than you'd think, especially with Karen. As I then send Greg out back to take on his Raticate, oh yes, I'm gonna make sure it stays in that grave too. I Poison Powder it. As it goes for a few Tail Whips, trying to get down on my defense, I then go for a pretty powerful Razor Leaf and kill the darn thing. Next is Kadabra, and I go for another Razor Leaf. Luckily, he can't do his Disable, so I go for another Razor Leaf, taking it out. Karen comes out on his Charmeleon, and I go for a Mega Kick. As he then goes for a Smoke Screen. Luckily, I have a double team, and, well, he keeps spamming Smoke Screen. As I go for a few Thunder Shocks to finally take him out. Next, I rub the captain's back, and get the cut TM. Next up, Lieutenant Surge. As I send out Greg up against his Voltorb, I then go for a few Razor Leafs, taking it out pretty quickly. Next up is his Pikachu, which I keep Greg in, going for a few more Razor Leaves. Unfortunately, he lives on 1 HP and then heals, which was annoying. Luckily, the next Razor Leaf takes it out. Raichu's up next, and I keep Greg in once more as he starts setting up double teams. Luckily, I get a Razor Leaf off. And yeah, luckily that Poison Powder was there, otherwise I would have been very annoyed. As he goes for a full heal though, which is worse, I go for a Leech Seed. I start trying to get Razor Leafs, but I'm missing. Luckily, my Leech Seed is working, and I get a Poison Powder off. So yeah, you can kind of tell how easy this was after this. As he goes for a Quick Attack, I mostly just stall out and win that. Take that, old man. Next up, Greg evolves into his final form. Oh yeah, I've been waiting for this. Anyway, as we see Poop at the cemetery, where he just buried his Raticate, he sends out his Pidgeotto as I send out my Karen. Seriously, they should make more graves at this point. He then sends out a Gyarados. Dude, seriously? Okay. Well, I mean, I get rid of it with one Thunder Shock, so... An Execute comes out, and I keep in Karen, getting off a Mega Kick. However, she then does a Confusion, and then goes for a Hypnosis. So I then send in Greg, as it goes for another Confusion. I won't lie, I hate Confusion, but anyway, we get off a Razor Leaf and get rid of that darn thing. Next up is Kadabra, and I keep in Greg. Unfortunately, I hit myself with my Confusion, but I then get out of it and go for a Razor Leaf. Then is the Charmeleon, which I send Karen out because I do not trust Greg. Unfortunately, he stays asleep, and so I have to deal with Embers, losing Karen. As I then send Greg out, I get a Poison Powder off, as it goes for an Ember. Then I get a Leech Seed, and, well, another Ember hurts me, but luckily, I'm able to whittle down its health. As it goes for Smoke Screens, I miss my attack, and, well, luckily, I have the other two things. Luckily, my Razor Leaf finally hits, and I take out the Charmeleon. Next, I finally get my last Pokemon, an Eevee named Shadow. And now, it's time for Erica. Victory Bell comes out, and so I send out Karen. As I go for a few Thunder Shocks, it tries getting me with Spores, and then I go for a Mega Kick. And then I realize I'm probably going to have to set up some double teams, so I set up a few, and then go for Thunderbolt. I won't lie, though, this was kind of annoying, since most of his attacks just didn't really work. And after a few Mega Kicks, though, I finally take out the Victory Bell. Next up is Tangela. And I send out Greg for it. I do not know what I was doing here. My emulator was a bit weird, so then I just go for a Razor Leaf. As it goes for a Constrict, I go for another Razor Leaf, taking it out with a crit. Nice. Next up is Vileplume. As I keep in a big chunky boy, and he gets put to sleep. Yay. I send out Shadows for his first battle, and he uses a Dig. And, well, I was kind of expecting that as I go for a few sand attacks, then going for a quick attack. And he gets Sunspore. I keep going for a few quick attacks here and there, but Shadow's going on low, so I send in Karen. As she gets hit with an acid, I send them a little Thunderbolt. As I miss my Mega Kick, though, well, good thing nothing happened, as I do another Mega Kick and will take out the Vileplume, winning the next badge. Next up is a battle against Giovanni. He sends out an Onyx, and I send out Shadow. However, realizing that Shadow wasn't a great idea, I send out Greg, which then gets paralyzed as he goes for Rock Throws, but I am able to get a Razor Leaf, stopping him from hurting me anymore. Next up is Rhyhorn, which, after it stops me, which I get paralyzed from, and stops me again, I get a Razor Leaf with a critical hit, getting rid of that thing. Next up is Kangaskhan, and I keep Greg in, as I go for a Poison Powder, but I get Fake Out. Then he goes for a Mega Punch, and I get paralyzed, where he bites me, and then I finally get the Poison Powder off. As he goes for another Mega Punch, nearly getting rid of me with a crit, I'm able to Leech Seed. Then I am able to use my Razor Leaf, which does a bit of damage, and with the Poison and Leech, well, it's out of here. Thank God. As I then pick up the Silph Scope, I go ahead and help out with Mr. Fuji, where I then capture a Snorlax. Don't ask why. As I bike around, I then decide, you know what, I want to go gambling, where I actually get 777s. I was going crazy. Anyway, next up is Koga. Coughing comes out first, so I send out Karen. As I go for a Thunderbolt, which takes it out pretty quickly, honestly. He tries sending out his Monk, so I decide to bring in my Greg, Leech Seeding it pretty quickly as it goes for an Acid Armor. As I then go for a Razor Leaf, trying to get rid of it before it starts minimizing, it goes for another Acid Armor. And yeah, I really didn't want to deal with it, but as it goes for a Sludge and I go for a Razor Leaf, he then decides to heal it up. I go for another Razor Leaf, which doesn't do all that much, all considering. And then I go for just a few more, as it starts setting up minimizing. Oh, this isn't going to end well. As I go for another Razor Leaf, he goes for another Sludge. I then get some pretty good damage in, and then he heals again. Seriously, this just goes like this for like way too long. Like, if I just have to say one thing about Koga, it's the fact that he seems to be one of the most annoying type of trainers, no matter where he's from. Johto, Kanto, it doesn't matter, he's annoying either way. Anyway, I finally get rid of that Muck as he sends out his Coughing, and, well, I'm thinking about Shadow, but I decide to go for Karen. As I go for another Thunderbolt, taking out the Coughing, and then it goes for an Explosion. Huh. Self-destructed itself, who'd have guessed? Anyway, it takes out Karen as I go for Shadow, but realize that Greg would be better in this situation. And as I go for Sludge and I go for Razor Leaf, we exchange hits. Luckily, one Razor Leaf was a crit as I go for a Leech Seed. A few more Sludges, and then, well, I finally get a Razor Leaf off, and we finally win. Oh, God. Anyway, I go up against Poop once more with his now newly evolved Pidgeotto. What? I almost said Pidgeotto. I don't know. It's just me. After Karen gets rid of the chicken and turns into pretty nice food, he then sends out his snake. I tell him to roast it. Karen does. Next up is Shadow, as he goes for going up against the Execute. He goes for a dig, which doesn't do much, as the Execute gets off a Stun Spore. As he goes for a Confusion, I try and do some sand attacks. However, I get paralyzed a few times, and it really doesn't help that Shadow is probably my weakest link, as so many more times I get paralyzed. I think that was like 5 turns? Seriously, what the heck? Anyway, I go for a full heal on Shadow after getting a few other sand attacks in, but it just is annoying. As he goes for another Sun Spore as I heal him up again. I go for another full heal, and I really don't need this to be my day as I go for a bite. Nearly getting rid of him, actually. However, as he goes for another Stun Spore, I'm able to bite him and get rid of this frickin' Execute. I hate these things. Next up is Alakazam, as he goes for a Calm Mind, and I go for a bite. As he then goes for Future Sight, I go for another bite trying to get rid of him. And one more bite finally takes out the Alakazam. And then comes out Charizard, as I send out Karen and use Thunderbolt. It goes down below half as he goes for Flamethrower, getting rid of Karen. I then send out Shadow, and the Future Sight attack actually hits, as the Charizard finishes him off with a Wing attack. As he goes for a Scary Face, I try and set up some poisons, and a Flamethrower nearly takes me out, as the Poison Powder finally hits. I then try and heal up Greg just to keep him alive long enough for the poison to take effect, nearly killing him, as I go for another heal. Let me tell you guys right now, this Charizard's gonna be very problematic later. Next up is my next battle against Giovanni, as he sends out Nidorino, and I send out Greg. After getting a Razor Leaf, I'm unable to get rid of the Nidorino pretty darn quickly. As he sends out a Nidoqueen next, I go for Leech Seed, just trying to stall it out, as I go for a Razor Leaf, which doesn't do much, as it goes for a Body Slam. A few more Razor Leafs and a few more Body Slams, and I get paralyzed. So that's fun, as I go for a Razor Leaf and take it out with a crit. Don't think I needed that, though. Anyway, next out is Kangaskhan, and I send out Karen. As I go for a Thunderbolt, I get flinched with a Fake Out, and so go for another Thunderbolt as it does a Tail Whip. One more Thunderbolt gets a crit. Dang. Anyway, next out is Greg as the Ahorn comes in, and you can kind of guess what happens now as he goes for a few Rock Blasts, and I get paralyzed, but Razor Leaf takes it out right after. Down goes Giovanni, and I get the Master Ball. Next up is Sabrina. As she sends out Kadabra, I send out Karen, and we go for a long starting match before I decide to go for a Thunderbolt, as she starts setting up Calm Minds. This could be a problem, but fortunately Thunderbolt takes out with another crit. Anyway, I send out Shadow as she goes for Mr. Mime, which is a girl for some reason. It sets up a barrier as I go for a dig, as it then sets up another barrier. Anyway, a bite is pretty effective and even flinches, luckily. She then goes for a Hyper Potion as I go for a few more bites. Then it goes for a Baton Pass, sending out a Venomoth. Anyway, as I then go for another dig, it goes for Psychic. And the dig doesn't really work, unfortunately, so I start going for Sand Attacks to try and stall it. As it keeps going for Psybeams. Goodness. Anyway, a takedown later takes it out. Whew. Next out, I send out Greg to take on the Mr. Mime again. She goes for another Hyper Potion as I go for a critical hit Razor Leaf. Nice. Well, anyway, next up is Alakazam as I go for a Leech Seed. Stalling tactics already as she goes for a Calm Mind. Fortunately, I then go for her and land a Poison Powder as she is still setting up some Calm Minds, which isn't going to end well. She goes for a full heal as I go for a Razor Leaf, which could be a problem, but fortunately, the Razor Leaf takes it out. And, well, we win. Fortunately. I then go up against Blaine. Time for a Burn Heal. As he sends out his Growlithe, I send out Oh My Karen and go for a Thunderbolt. As it then goes for a Fire Blast. He then sets up a Hyper Potion and another Thunderbolt takes down the same as I go for a Strength. By the way, who knew that Pikachu could learn Strength? Anyway, next up is Shadow as Ponyta comes out as I go for a Dig and, well, miss a Fire Blast, taking out the Ponyta rather quickly. Next up is Rapidash as I keep in my Shadow and go in for another Dig. This Dig brings it down to red as it goes for a Fire Blast, taking me to above half. He goes for a Hyper Potion as I go for another Bite, then go for another Dig, taking out the Rapidash this time. Next is Arcanine, but I keep in a little cutesy as I go for another Dig. Unfortunately, it doesn't even go to a third as it takes me out with a Fire Blast. Next up is Karen as I use a Strength as she then gets taken down by a Takedown. I really don't know what to do, so I just go for a Razor Leaf, and as Blaine goes for a pretty powerful Fire Blast, I'm able to take out the Arcanine with one Razor Leaf. As I then actually learn Synthesis. This will come good in later terms, but for right now, we win against Blaine. Anyway, Will asks me then if he wants me to come, and I say no. Next up is Giovanni. As I go for a Razor Leaf against his Rhydon. Crap, why did I say Rhydon? His Rhyhorn. And, well, he sends out his second one as I go for another Razor Leaf, taking that one out the same way. Well, this seems easy. He goes for a Doug Trio as I go for another Razor Leaf, taking it out. I think I see a pattern here. He sends out his Nidoqueen as I go for a Razor Leaf, doing a crit as he then goes for Earthquake. He then sets up a Hyper Potion as I go for another Razor Leaf, which doesn't even go to half, as another Razor Leaf takes it to the red as it goes for another Earthquake. Another Hyper Potion comes out, and yeah. Fortunately, I'm able to get a seed off it as it keeps on going for Earthquake. I get another Razor Leaf as another Earthquake. Anyway, I take it out with a Leech Seed, and next up is Nidoking. I love this Pokemon, honestly, but it's time to die. Unfortunately, its Earthquake does way too much as I finally use Synthesis. Goodness, that's pretty powerful Earthquake, goodness. Anyway, Razor Leaf, critical might I add, takes it out. Which, thank goodness, that could have ended badly. I beat Giovanni, getting the Earth Badge. I should probably tell you right now that I lost to my rivals so many times. The battle just before the Victory Road is really challenging. Luckily, I did get one good time to finally beat him. He sends out his Pidgeot as I send out Oh My Karen. I go for a double team as he goes for a quick attack as I start setting up double teams from knowing just how powerful this team is. He goes for a Feather Dance, and yet he still can't touch me as I go for a Thunderbolt. Whew. So far so good. Next up is Rhyhorn as I decide to go for my newly learned Earthquake. I love that. Anyway, next I sends out his Alakazam as I go for another Earthquake. Yeah, I am glad I put that on Greg. Next up is Charizard as I go for Shadow. I heal up Karen and, well, I then decide to go for a takedown. Flamethrower nearly takes Shadow out, and then another one does. Luckily, that was Shadow's job, as next up is Karen with a Thunderbolt, a crit might I add, taking him out. Whew, that could have ended badly. Next up is Execute as I go for an Earthquake, which does a pretty decent chunk, as I then go for a Giga Drain. As it goes for a Sleep Powder, which was annoying. And then it goes for a Solar Beam. As I'm just fast asleep for no apparent reason, it keeps on going for Solar Beam, which, dude, come on. Anyway, Giga Drain then takes this little piece of eggs out, as I then have to deal with Gyarados. Wait, did I say deal with? I meant suck out its energy, because that's pretty much all I did. But first, I go for a Toxic, as it goes for a Hydro Pump, and, well, I go for a Giga Drain. I need the health, baby. Come on. As it goes for a Rain Dance, and the poison does the rest. And that's when I finally defeated Poop at the Victory Road, which finally I got through. It was actually a lot harder than you'd think, as I finally made it to the Indigo Plateau. Anyway, while I'm there, I decided to then set up my team's final levels and final movesets. Yes, all of them are level 72. Anyway, for Shadow, I have Dig, Sand Attack, Bite, and Double Edge. Greg, I have Earthquake, Toxic, Giga Drain, and Synthesis. And for Karen, I have Thunderbolt, Strength, Double Team, and Iron Tail. Honestly, I'm pretty proud of what I got so far. And honestly, I really hope I can do this. Comment down below if you think I can win it. Anyway, first up is Elite Four member Lorelei. She sends out a Dugong as I send out Karen and go for a Thunderbolt, taking it below half as it goes for a Surf. Fortunately, my next Thunderbolt takes it out. Next up is her Cloyster as I go for another Thunderbolt, but she goes for a Protect. So, I go for another Thunderbolt, taking it out rather quickly. Next up is our Slowbro, as I go for double teams, trying to stop her from hurting me, but the Surf takes out Karen, as I go for Greg and do Giga Drains. This takes out our Slowbro, as next up is her Lapras. I go for another Giga Drain, which takes her below half, as she goes for an Ice Beam. A crit, might I add, as she then eats her Citrus Berry to heal up. I fortunately get a Giga Drain and take her out. Next up is her Jinx, but fortunately one Earthquake is enough to take her out. Whew. Next up is Bruno. As he sends out his Onix, I send out my Karen, as I then go for an Iron Tail, which fortunately hits, as it goes for a Rock Tomb, lowering my speed. Fortunately, his Strength is able to hurt it a bit, but he then goes for a full Restore, as I go for another Strength, and then go for another Iron Tail. Another Rock Tomb lowers my speed even more, so I stupidly decide to go for Thunderbolt, which leaves me wide open to a hit from Onix with Earthquake. Giga Drain takes out the Onix, but I was honestly stupid there. Hitmonchan is up next as I go for another Earthquake, as it tries going for a Sky Uppercut, but fortunately it doesn't, and my final Earthquake takes that out. Hitmonlee then comes out as I send out another Earthquake as it goes for a Mega Kick. One more Earthquake takes this one out too. His next Onix comes out, and well, Giga Drain is all I'm needing for that. As next up is his Machamp. Luckily I have Toxic, which I can then use against him as he goes for a Scary Face. And well, I then decide to go for Earthquake as he goes for another Scary Face. As he eats a Citrus Berry and then gets hurt by poison as he goes for a Cross Drop, and I go for another Earthquake as the poison takes him out. And there's Bruno. Next is Agatha. She sends her Gengar, and I send out Greg, going for a Giga Drain. She then goes for a double team, and, well, I decide to switch into Shadow due to the low amount of damage I did. Missing a Shadow Punch, but instead getting confused. Luckily, I'm able to get a bite off. She then goes for a full restore, as I try and go for another bite, but miss. Fortunately, the next bite hits, as she then goes for another Confuse Ray, as I go for a bite, getting out of the confusion. Next is her Golbat, as I go for a double edge, but she does an air cutter for not that much actually, fortunately. Nearly getting rid of the Golbat. I then have to worry about it going for another air slash, but luckily it doesn't do as much, as I go for a double edge, taking it out. Next up is Arbok, as I go for a dig. Luckily the dig hits, but not that much happens, as she goes for a Sludge Bomb. I go for another dig, which unfortunately doesn't do as much as I hoped, but good enough, as she goes for a Sludge Bomb, doing way more damage. She goes for an Iron Tail, but luckily the dig was there, so hitting it and taking it out with my next dig. Gengar comes out, and I go for an Iron Tail with Karen. She goes for a Sludge Bomb, going to above half. As next, I go for a Shadow. She goes for a Shadow Ball, and I go for a Thunderbolt. Luckily, another Thunderbolt takes her to half, as another one takes her to red, but a Shadow Ball takes my Karen out. Next, she goes for a Sludge Bomb, which unfortunately poisons Shadow. And yeah, he gets taken out. Next is Greg, and I go for a Giga Drain against her Haunter, which is a critical actually, but it goes for Hypnosis. Yeah, as you can tell from here, I was just dealing with sleep as it did some Dream Eaters. I really hate sleep, honestly. It's really annoying. I don't know, I just don't like it. Anyway, I go for a Giga Drain as it goes for another Hypnosis. I'm so glad I had full heals. And I go for another Giga Drain, taking out the Haunter. And finally rating against Agatha. Next up is Lance. He sent out his Gyarados and I sent out Shadow, but the Intimidate definitely wasn't helping, so I decided to send in Karen, with his Gyarados sending out a Dragon Rage. Luckily, I've dealt with enough Gyaradoses to know that one Thunderbolt is enough. Next I have his Dragonair, and I send out Shadow once more and do a double edge, which takes out the Dragonair, which honestly I was really happy for. His second Dragonair comes out, and I just go for another double edge and does the same thing. Next up is Dragonite, as I send out my Karen and go for a Thunderbolt, which doesn't do much as he goes for an Outrage, taking out Karen. I send in Greg and go for a Toxic. And the Outrage continues, which is annoying, but luckily it gets confused afterwards as I go for a Giga Drain. And it actually hurts itself in confusion, which I was happy for. Next I use Synthesis to heal myself up as it goes for getting hit again by itself. I don't know, I was really lucky. Unfortunately, he goes for a full restore, as I go for a Giga Drain, which obviously doesn't kill. He goes for a Safeguard, and then goes for a Wing Attack, as I go for a Giga Drain, as he goes for another Wing Attack, almost taking Greg out. Next is Shadow, and luckily he doesn't go down, so I'm able to go for a pretty powerful double edge, but he faints due to the Outrage. Next I give myself a Fate Potion to heal up my Greg, as he goes for an Outrage. I go for a Toxic, and he gets confused, fortunately. And then I go for Giga Drain, as he's confused and hurts himself in his confusion again and loses to the poison. He then sends out his Arcanine, and I go for another Toxic, but miss as he goes for a Scary Face. I try another Toxic as he goes for a Wing Attack, but the safeguard is not letting me get there as he goes for another Wing Attack, which is a crit and nearly takes out Greg, but I then heal him up. Another Wing Attack, and I decide to try and go for another Toxic, and it works this time, fortunately. As I then go and try and heal up one of my teammates, Karen in this case, going for a Max Revive. Unfortunately, the Wing Attacks are taking me down really low, but I'm able to get Synthesis off. I then go for Earthquake because at the time I was out of moves, and luckily by just Toxic stalling I am finally able to win against this pretty powerful bird, all things considering. So next up, of course, is my rival, Poop. As you can tell, this was a battle for the ages. So how did it go? First I started off with Karen as he went for his Pidgeot, and somehow he didn't die. Seriously, usually that ends differently, but I guess this time was different, until the next turn where a Thunderbolt critical hit takes him out. Next up is Rhyhorn. Finally I got this name right, as I go for a Giga Drain. And yeah, you can tell how well that went. Next I send out Shadow as he sends out his Alakazam. I decided to go for a Double Edge, and actually goes below half, so I then decide to go for a Bite. Psychic is pretty powerful as the Bite doesn't do all that much, so I decided to go for another Double Edge. And now I'm in the red, which was a problem. Luckily the leftovers helped me out there, but Psychic took him out. Next up is Karen, as I go for a Thunderbolt and take out that wizard. Next up is Executor, and so I send out Greg and Toxic Stall. He goes for an Egg Bomb, but then I go for an Earthquake, which particularly doesn't do much as he then goes for a Sleep Powder, which was annoying, so I full heal him up because I'm not dealing with sleep. He keeps laying on the Egg Bombs as I go for another, well, pretty ineffective Earthquake, but the poison is definitely doing its job until he decides to fully I hate full restores, I'm not gonna lie. I go for another Toxic which lands, and then I go for a Synthesis to heal up. And let me just tell you right now, I'm so glad he got Synthesis, as for one thing, I don't have to use as many potions. And if you're mad about the potions thing, sorry. Anyway, after a few more turns, and well, him just putting me to sleep again, he finally gets killed by the poison, as Charizard comes out, and Karen obviously goes for a good old-fashioned Thunderbolt, which goes below half. Fortunately, his Fire Blast misses, as I go for another Thunderbolt, taking him to 1 HP, as the Fire Blast takes Karen out. I go for a Revive with Karen so that I'm not dead, but fortunately the full restore, oh god, I'm screwed. Anyway, Fire Blast nearly takes out Greg, but I was honestly surprised it didn't. But the Aerial Ace right after takes him out. Karen goes for a Thunderbolt, and unfortunately doesn't do as much as I had hoped. So I decide to, well, try and revive Greg, just in case, as I know he can take a Fire Blast. Karen goes down as Greg comes out, and I go for a Giga Drain. Doesn't do much, but fortunately the poison does something, as I'm able to poison him. I then decide to go for a Revive on Karen. Yeah, it's just me this entire time, honestly. I'm sorry. Anyway, I go for Synthesis, and then as the Charizard slashes at me, I go for a Giga Drain, taking him out. Oh, that took way too much time, as I then go for Karen to take out his Gyarados, his final Pokemon. And the Intimidate doesn't really do much, as one Thunderbolt takes him out, and I become the champion. Take that, Poop 69. Not only did your parents disrespect you, I just did. Oh, and look, there's your grandpa here to chastise you as well. So yeah, honestly, that was kind of fun, all things considered. And really, I would just have to say that I really love playing this game. I've never played Leaf Green or Fire Red before this, and yeah, I honestly thought it was really fun doing this instead of just a regular old Pokemon thing. Yeah, I don't really know what else to put out for the outro, but anyway, tell me how you feel about it all, and thank you guys for watching. And hopefully I'll be able to bring out something else for you. I know that the Pokemon videos have been coming out a lot lately, but it's because I did promise that I'd be making a ton of these. And this is actually something I've been making for a long time. But anyway, if you like this, then you can go watch other Pokemon YouTubers that do this just way better than me. Honestly, I just started out on this, as you can tell. This is definitely the first time I've ever done this, so please check out those other Pokemon YouTubers. But still remember to subscribe, and if you can, please subscribe to my other friends who have helped me along the way, such as Shadow and RJ and them, as well. They've helped me through my videos, and honestly, I think they're just people you should definitely subscribe to. Anyway, with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.